Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
I'm so glad you're joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers. We're calling this the Diddy trial debrief. We're taking a look at what happened during the trial, but most importantly, what happens next for Sean Diddy Combs, and what does this case say about our legal system and our society. Sean Diddy Combs is one of the most famous men in the world, but that did not matter to federal authorities who slapped him with RICO sex trafficking charges that could have kept him locked down for life. True to form, Combs avoided the worst possible outcome and will not have to register as a sex offender. But the guilty verdict on 2 prostitution charges makes him a convicted felon. Sentencing is set for October 3rd. Criminal defense attorney Phillip says there's a fork in the road ahead.
He could be released as early as his sentencing date in October, or Judge Subramanian, because of the 2 counts of the Mann Act that he was convicted of, has every right to sentence him to up to 10 years per count. Do I think that ultimately he's going to get 20 years consec? I don't. I do think that there's a possibility that he may be looking somewhere in the 3 to 4 year range.
Throughout his life, Sean Diddy Combs has signaled his major transitions and reinventions with a new nickname, going from Puffy to Puff Daddy to P. Diddy to Diddy and then to Love and Brother Love. Fans and haters alike are debating whether he can reinvent himself once again and emerge from this entire criminal conviction with a way to regain his stature and influence.
Diddy is like the phoenix that continues to rise from the ashes. No matter what happens to him, he seems to find a way to weave his self back into the zeitgeist and to make sure that his name is still ringing bells. For millennials and older, it's going to be very hard for us to divorce ourselves from the music and the culture.
The split verdict is being seen in the hip-hop community with mixed emotions and even confusion. Some thought it would be seen as a cautionary tale, but maybe not, says hip-hop journalist Mark Elibert.
Not only men, but women as well have to be careful with how they're moving in this industry. But at the same time, this has been going on for years now, and I don't think it's ever going to fully go away.
We've got a great panel breaking this down for us from every angle. Let's get right to it. Joining me now for this conversation is Asia Grace. She's a lifestyle reporter with the New York Post. Asia, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Lisa.
We appreciate it. Also joining us is prominent hip-hop journalist Mark Elibert. He's been covering the trial, covering hip-hop for many prominent publications and platforms. Mark, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Also with us is Phillip Hamilton. He's a criminal defense attorney and managing partner of Hamilton Clark LLP, tried and won many federal cases. Phil, thank you so much for being with us.
Lisa, thanks for having me. Always good to be back.
Thank you so much. Phil, in terms of this split verdict in the Diddy trial, explain that for us. And do you think it was the right verdict?
I think outside of the right or wrong or the philosophical questions, I think in many respects, based on what the jury heard, the verdict makes sense, split as it is. So when you say split, what ultimately happened? Well, you remember that Diddy was charged with a RICO count, essentially of running an enterprise that, without getting too much into the legalese, was built and centered around him being able to carry out certain criminal acts, right? That the enterprise served him, whether it was for arsons with Kid Cudi, whether it was for kidnapping, whether it was for sex trafficking, you name it. Diddy beat that charge. The jury ultimately found that either A, there was no criminal enterprise, that Bad Boy Records was not acting as a criminal operation, and or they found that even to the extent that it was, it didn't commit the predicate acts that it was charged with. There's that with respect to the RICO, no RICO. Regarding the 2 counts of the substantive sex trafficking, which included both all of the allegations underlying Cassie Ventura and Jane, the jury ultimately found that neither one of those women was either coerced, defrauded, manipulated, or any way made to involuntarily participate in commercial sex acts. And basically the 2 counts that he was found guilty of, which was essentially the interstate prostitution and transporting people across state lines for the purposes of commercial sex. Well, I think we all could look at the case. We all could be a fly on the wall and understand the facts to know it was going to be very difficult for him to beat that because he was essentially conceding that.
A lot of the testimony, Asia Grace, in this case had to do with these lifestyles. A lot of people were shocked by what they were hearing and seeing. Should they have been that shocked?
be quite honest, this trial really didn't lift the curtain as much as it did kind of confirm what the streets were already saying, what a lot of people already suspected, not only about Puff Daddy, but about a number of the big names that we love. We see their shiny heinies and we, praise them, but we kind of in the back of our minds always suspect that there's things going on behind closed doors that we don't know. And it often does come to light, as it has in the case of Diddy. And since the verdict, even though he was found guilty of those 2 counts, it does seem like in a lot of people's minds, he's somewhat absolved of almost everything. The court of public opinion has changed its tune. Before they were calling him the bad, 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 bad boy of society. And now they're pretty much recrowning him the can't stop, won't stop king. And they're also now looking at some of his alleged victims, namely Cassie, Jane Doe, as well as other people that have testified for the prosecution, and they're kind of giving them the side eye, saying, well, Cassie specifically, we thought she was this traumatized, trapped woman in this horrible relationship, but once the world got wind of the millions she's recently received, everyone's vibes kind of changed, and they're looking now at her and almost vilifying Miss Ventura and sympathizing with Diddy, saying, well, was he, this poor rich guy that just kind of got played by a femme fatale and an unfair system? I mean, the switch up has been very swift and very shocking to see on social media.
Mark Elibert, you've spoken about the hip hop community, the various opinions that people have. What was your reaction when you heard about this split verdict?
I was shocked. Given everything we've heard and given all the reactions from people who supported him and people who supported Cassie, it was just shocking to see. I mean, I guess it was a shock because we heard about everything that was going on and what was going on behind closed doors. But then after hearing that the jury felt that these women weren't coerced into it, it's like, oh my God, what's going on right now? So it was shocking at first, but then now I'm just trying to understand like what's really the truth? What really happened? Because everybody's reaction has been split. You have people who are shocked and upset that he didn't get convicted of the 2 serious crimes. You have other people who are happy and dancing with baby oil in front of the courthouse, which was a wild thing, so it's just it's a very weird time right now. Like the weirdness that was going on before this trial is just carrying on into now because it was a split decision, and it's like we don't really know what really happened in those rooms. We just know what was said, and it's just like we don't know where we stand right now.
We'll be right back after this.
Phil, why is he still in jail if he was cleared of the top 2 of the most serious charges?
Yeah, he was cleared of the most serious charges, meaning he doesn't have to worry about potentially spending the rest of his life in prison or an R. Kelly style 30 years in prison. Like that, of course, he skirted around. But the 2 counts that he was convicted of, which are essentially Mann Act violations, that particular provision within the United States Code carries with it a presumption of detention. And so here, Judge Subramanian was very clear with Diddy's attorneys that because they conceded the violence throughout the course of the trial, right, their pretrial papers, their opening statements, the closing arguments in regards to the domestic violence, clearly the video with Cassie, you name it, because all of that was conceded, they really couldn't run from one of the critical prongs that ground whether or not you should be released on a Mann Act violation or not. And let's not forget that both of those counts still carry up to 10 years in prison. The judge could potentially run them consecutively. Do I think that he will in light of everything? No, because it's not one of those kinds of cases where, say, Diddy was bringing, at least as far as we know in this case, underage women or anything like that across state lines. So I don't really see him, doing 10 years consecutively on each count to amount to 20 years. But could he do 2, 3, 4 years, something like that? That's totally within the realm, particularly in light of a lot of the other conduct that came out in that trial.
Bill, I wanted to know if you can provide some clarity here. Even though Diddy was not found guilty on the more serious charges, does that mean straight up that it just did not happen, that the allegations against him are completely false? Or does that mean that the prosecution just did not meet a certain standard enough to have a guilty verdict for those counts?
No, fantastic question, Asia. Look, you come with a lot of constitutional protections as a criminal defendant. And one of the biggest protections that you come with is that the government has to prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. In criminal court, the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt is so much more so much heavier for the government to reach, unlike, say, your day-to-day plaintiff that just may be suing Diddy. So long-windedly, I'm answering your question to say the jury didn't say that these things didn't happen. In fact, they may think more likely than not that he did run a RICO enterprise or that he did sex traffic these women, but more likely than not, it's not going to cut it in criminal court. It has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, if that helps.
Absolutely.
Mark, what about some of the witnesses? Because it's like there were witnesses. It was obvious they were lying. They were caught in outright lies. And what about that? What do you think people paid a lot of attention to that?
I think they do. I had a few conversations with people who were watching the trial, and they were saying, "Wow, how didn't these witnesses, if they saw something, why didn't they say something?" So a lot of what I feel like what a lot of the witnesses were saying when they took the stand did play into the factor of this, and it did kind of change Diddy's public perception, because it's like you've had all these people around you, and people were seeing what was going on, but they saw things that were not right, and you guys still didn't say anything.
But was part of it like the so-called, which some people would say is actually fake, but the street code and the hip hop code of no snitching. You see somebody, you see something happening, but you don't say anything about it.
Me personally, coming from where I come from in Harlem, that was something that was like golden rule, no snitching. But when it comes to human lives that are being abused and violated, we have to say something. We have to speak up, because these crimes are happening. And I'm kind of seeing right now that it's it's kind of a separation of the generations now. The people that are looking at this trial right now, the younger audience, is like, why aren't people saying anything? What's going on? The older generation is like, well, we're not saying anything because we don't want to cooperate, or whatever the case may be. So we're seeing we're seeing an interesting synergy going on with that between the generations when it comes to snitching as well.
Phil, what about as a criminal defense attorney? Here was a case that basically, would this case have even been brought if Cassie had not filed that civil lawsuit against Diddy in November 2023?
You know, my vote on this is always probably not. Clearly, I can never say anything for a guarantee, but I certainly know that if I had been advising Diddy around that time, I would have told him to pay her with interest, because whatever she's looking for will be a lot cheaper than what you will have to go through if this opens up, if other people start coming at you civilly. And when other people start coming at you civilly and more light starts to get shown on some of your conduct, whether actual or even false allegations, you have a situation where the government may start looking into things. That's exactly what happened here. And now you end up dealing with this federal prosecution where not only did you have to pay the millions to Cassie, then you had to pay the millions to your legal team, then you had to pay probably with your reputation for the rest of your life. I mean, one question I have for all of you guys is, does Diddy end up kind of getting that OJ effect where, like, okay, you beat the top counts, you're feeling good, you come out, you're thinking that life's going to be great, but then, like OJ learned, every time he went to get something to eat, someone's running up to him saying murderer. He just wasn't the OJ pre-1994. And so I wonder with Diddy, is it going to be the same situation for him? Like, is he going to be in for a rude awakening? Like, hey, what happened? Why are people looking at me crazy? Why don't people look at me the way that they used to? And it's because you didn't pay Cassie that money when she asked for that money up front, which maybe could have kept a lot of this quiet, certainly could have potentially kept you away from a federal trial. But sometimes people with that much power, they can't see these kinds of collateral consequences that may come from bad decisions that they make. And I think him not paying Cassie was a very bad decision, because he ended up paying her anyway. And
Well, let's get a reaction from Mark and from Asia. Asia, do you think Diddy's going to have that OJ syndrome?
To be quite honest, we have seen Diddy reinvent himself a number of times. This is going to have to be the biggest comeback he'll ever make. But if recent history has taught us nothing, it's proven that a conviction does not mean that you cannot reinvent yourself and still rise to the top. Now, whether or not people want to see that from Diddy, we'll see. But how he's going to reinvent himself, is he going to become Pastor Puffy and he's going to be, laying hands and speaking in tongues because of all of the prayer he was doing in that courtroom and in that jail cell? Who knows? He might go into prison reform. He might, God only knows, he might be a spokesperson for sex workers of America. Who knows? However, we believe that somebody of Diddy status can't just fade in the dark. He's not that type of personality. He's going to try his best, and how the world will receive him is yet to be seen.
Mark, do you think he'll be able to make a comeback?
I feel like he can if he just focuses on the music. That's why we fell in love with him. He made great music because right before all this happened, he dropped the Love album.
Right.
That was a fire album, Grammy nominated. It was an R&B album, and it was like Diddy brought us back to that 90s R&B vibe. So I feel like if he just stays out of the spotlight and just puts music out, keeps producing, whatever the case may be, I think he could make a comeback. But because he is Diddy and he is this larger than life character, I don't know if he'll be able to stay out the spotlight, even if he tried to. As far as like how hip hop perceives him, with the hip hop community, we like to protect our own. You see, there's people who still protect R. Kelly, even though he's, he got convicted of what it is, but there's still people who think like, yeah, I still love R. Kelly. I'm gonna still play his music. I'm gonna still talk about the things that he does. So I think Diddy will be on that level as well.
Asia, do you think women will be lining up to try to get with Diddy? Because one of the other incredible things during the case was even the women that had claimed to have had bad experiences with him, been attacked by him, been raped by him, been physically abused by him, they always wanted to get back with him. Do you think women will be looking at this and go, wow, he was still paying James $10,000 a month rent, even though she's on the court testifying, to testify against him?
Unfortunately, Lisa, I do not believe that this conviction is going to change anything. I don't think the conviction can stop or will stop the line of women that are going to be waiting for Diddy to come out of jail, or sending him, messages as a pen pals or whatever they can do to get in touch with him, because money talks, unfortunately. And again, like you just mentioned, we do know that he was still funding a lot of these lifestyles and a lot of the lives of the women in his life, even though there was either a breakup or some allegations, a lawsuit, what have you, he was still very involved. And a lot of people, not just women, are attracted to power. They're attracted to influence. And that's something that Diddy's always going to be known for. Whether or not the forever icon status stays in place is yet to be seen. But I do believe that folks really just want to be around somebody who attracts light.
We were discussing earlier, though, OJ still had his women, right? And we know what his charge was, right? And women were still dealing with him, right? Wow. So I guess to your point, Angela, yeah, Diddy may be okay.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. Mark, will it ever be safe to play Diddy music at a barbecue, at a party, at an event?
I was at a party over the weekend and I was Diddy bopping All About the Benjamins. So, the best way to explain it is that, Diddy has countless hits, and it's not just his hits. It's Biggie, It's 112, Mary J. Blige. So a whole bunch of people he worked with. So the music is going to get played either way. I think the thing with that is that, and I have to bring up R. Kelly, because in the Surviving R. Kelly documentary, they said a lot of his songs might have been references to what he was doing with these underage girls. That's the difference between him and Diddy. Diddy was making party records and I'm gonna have fun.
And there were no underage girls, we want to remind everybody, and no underage boys or girls in this, despite a lot of the social media, mayhem.
Yeah. So hearing his music, we're not going to be in the club and be like, damn, was he talking about abusing somebody here? It's like, oh no, he's talking about drinking Ciroc and wearing Sean John and stuff like that. So I think it's still going to be okay to play his music. People still love him, and he's somebody that the kids say has aura.
Phil, does Diddy, now that he's been convicted on these prostitution charges, does he have to register as a sex offender?
No. One of the bonuses of him beating the sex trafficking counts, in addition to not having to do a mandatory minimum of 15 years up to potentially life, is that he doesn't have to register as a sex offender, because those two counts of transporting, people across state lines for the purposes of commercial sex acts, it doesn't come with a requirement for sexual registration.
What about the sentencing? What would you guess? What's your best educated guess at this point of what he ends up with?
You kind of keep hearing it come out of me. If it's not, he just released and just everything's good on time served, then, it could potentially be like maybe 3 to 4 years. And I think if that's the case, what's the question then in the back of everyone's mind? It's like, does Trump come with the pardon? I don't know if that would happen at any point before the midterms in November of 26. So if he got like 3 to 4 years, could he potentially end up sitting in there at least past November of 26? Certainly.
Thanks for joining us for this Diddy trial debrief episode of Street Soldiers. You can watch it again and share it on our Fox 5 NY YouTube page and the Fox Local app on your phone and TV. Remember, use your mind, it's your best weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's push for peace, love, and justice for all.